Hey guys, we are live, and today we are talking about importing an Access database into SharePoint. Really excited to cover this because this is something that you might come up against time and time again. Perhaps you have an Excel spreadsheet or some data that you need to get into SharePoint. Now, if you have a premium license, I would actually recommend using something like Dataverse, or if you have existing data in Microsoft SQL Server, that's a great data source as well. In fact, the Dataverse data source is actually a SQL Server database out in the cloud in Azure. So, but the Dataverse has a lot of additional features that Microsoft has added to it that SQL Server doesn't have. But what's great about SQL Server is you've got those store procedures and views that you can create that you can utilize. But today we're working with SharePoint. We want to get that data into SharePoint. And listen, at the near the end of this live stream, I'm going to tell you or explain why I'm not connecting to this Access database directly. Okay, so I've got an outline here of what I'll be talking about during this live session. I anticipate this will be an hour. If there's a lot of questions and things go through, or even any issues that any snags we have along the way, we're going to be digging into those. These live streams usually last between an hour to two. Okay, so I will be covering at the end of why I just didn't connect to this Access database directly. The Access database that we will be working with is the infamous Northwind Traders database, and that database was actually made popular. In fact, let me go in here to StreamYard and take out this thing here at the bottom. It's let's see here, branding. Where's that at? There we go. Getting used to all this live streaming stuff. Okay, there we go. We're using the Northwind Traders database. It was made popular with Access to actually showcase the features of Access. And what's so special about this database and why I'm so interested in it is that it already has sample data. It has probably a good, in fact, hey, let's just show you what I'm looking at here on the screen. If I change the view here. So this is the Northwind database here within Access. It was meant to showcase the features of Access. It's been out there for a long time. There are better sample databases out there. In fact, if you look at AdventureWorks and some other sample databases, those were meant more for a SQL Server and .NET development. But this was a good one to use to what I'd like to do is actually import this into SharePoint. And I just sort of wanted to give you an overview of what we have here. Okay. First of all, let me show you how to find this database. If you have access, well, you need access, or at least that's the easiest way of getting it. You can actually get a copy of it, perhaps. There's actually quite a few versions of it out there online. You can actually find the SQL Server version if you want to. You might actually find an Excel version of it. But this is probably one of the better versions of it, in my opinion. So if you go in here and click on More Templates, and just simply, now I have Northwind up here, probably because it's showing up there because I've searched for it before. There's all kinds of databases here, and I clicked around. There's all kinds of, these are actually great ideas for PowerApps applications, guys. So look at this: asset tracking, context, event management. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff in here. But I sort of opened some of those and it doesn't have any sample data. So generating sample data, it's not impossible. It's you got to search around the net, see if there's some free sample data you can sort of import, and some of it people want to charge for. So and that's completely fine. I mean, if it saves you time, sometimes time is money. So what's great about this, it has the sample data, it's free. We can just go in here and I'm going to type in Northwind, and there we go. So I'm going to double click on that. Okay. Now, what's great about Access, even if you don't have any Access data, if you have Excel data, so a lot of times you might have a spreadsheet in Excel and you want to utilize it in PowerApps, which is very common. Okay. And what's great about it, what's not so great about Excel is that it's a horrible data source for PowerApps. Okay, so a lot of times it gets locked if you have it open. Let's say in Excel, you need to have it in OneDrive to connect to it. And if you have it open, it's going to lock yourself out, and only one person can be connected to it at once. So it just makes for a horrible data source. You want to get that at least in the SharePoint. Uh, and if you have a premium license, I would go for Dataverse or SQL Server. But SharePoint, for a lot of people, especially people that are learning, SharePoint is sort of like a sweet spot, a great data source to learn on. But if you work for an employer or you are a business owner, somebody works for a business that has a premium licensing, I wouldn't mess with SharePoint. I would work inside of the Dataverse because it has a lot other cooler features. But because SharePoint is so popular, you'll see people like me and other people that provide training material for PowerApps to use SharePoint because people are looking to know how to do things with SharePoint because they don't have that premium licensing. They're just trying to learn, trying to work with something simple and free. Okay, so we open this up. What I was going to mention was if you go into SharePoint and try to import, I've got a little SharePoint site. Before we jump into Access, I want to show you this. If you have Excel data and you want to import it, you go into site contents for a SharePoint site and you go in and you say, give me a new list, and you can tell it, hey, I need a new list from Excel. Okay. And then you're going to need to upload it. And what I have noticed, if you look back at my live streams, I have a live stream for getting an old service desk ticketing system, and it uses Excel, and a lot of the templates use Excel. So, for example, let me just show you. It'll always be showing what I'm talking about here. So, if I go in here and let's go into Home, and we'll click on More Create Options, okay, and we'll scroll down, and there's two of them here. They sort of look alike. So you got PowerApps Training for Office, but then you have PowerApps Training. So there's one. So if you're wanting PowerApps Training, this is the one to go for first, and then maybe later on this. But a lot of these templates, they'll use an Excel spreadsheet through OneDrive as the data source, okay? And then there's one that I went through, and I'm looking for it now. Yeah, here it is, Service Desk. Yeah. So if you were to create this little Service Desk, I have a whole live stream. It was one of my first live streams that I did. And what I did is I went through this, and if you open it up, let me give it a moment here to open it up. It will actually say at the top for any of these templates, it will say, make this template your own. And you click on that and see, there it is. Whenever you see this, you want to click on that right away, because if you don't do it, I've noticed that it stops appearing. And so you miss out on your chance to actually have data for the template. Okay. So if I were to click on this, it's going to say, okay, where do you want to store the spreadsheet? Okay. So, what I did in that first live stream that I did. So if you go to my YouTube channel, and in fact, let me pull up just so that you guys see it and know what I'm talking about here. I don't want to lose anybody here. So I'm just going to pull in an incognito window, and I'm going to type in Darren Neese, which is probably the easiest way to find me on YouTube, by the way. And you click on my channel, and it's going to start playing one of my videos typically. At the very bottom, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see past live streams. So you'll click on that text, past live streams, okay? And it's this one right here, okay? So if you go here, you know what I could do, guys? Is that I could share this link in the chat just to make it easier for you guys, okay? And by the way, I want to connect to you guys here. So JC says, looking forward to this. I'm actually thinking of switching from a SharePoint list to Access for the business app I'm creating. Okay, so you want to stay till the end where I talk about actually using Access itself as a data source. Okay, we will talk about that at the end. And then Mr. Akabus says hello. Well, hello, Mr. Akabus. All right. So let's see here. I've shared the link there. So here within, of course, I'm live streaming to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So there is the link. It's there in the chat. You can click on it and get to this live stream if you're interested in that particular app. So that's why I had that come up, and we're just going to put up with 2 or 3 seconds of this ad here. We're going to skip the ad. Here it is. And what I do is I run through and actually I'm getting that template to work, and I move that over to the SharePoint as the data source. Move all those individual data sources into SharePoint so that we could connect to it and make that app so much better, and also get the whole thing to work. Because if you notice, if you try to open up that template and try to run it, it doesn't work. There's all kinds of errors. So that was the whole purpose of that first live stream. And what you notice if you step through that live stream with me, watch it, is that you'll notice that we have a lot of problems because SharePoint will actually rename. It won't actually bring in those column names properly. It will create weird column names. And then when you're working with it in PowerApps, the column names are all messed up. Okay. This is where, and this is what I cover in that live stream, is that Access comes to the rescue. We can actually open up those Excel, open up the Excel data within Access and actually connect to that SharePoint list and actually get that stuff over there. And it does a much better job at that. So guys, using Access to import data into SharePoint, it's a great tool. It's a great tool. Okay, so I'm looking here. Okay, Mr. Akabis, I have a programming background. I'm looking forward to learning about PowerApps. Awesome. Well, I come from a programming background. In fact, I got into programming back in 1999. And I was using Access databases as a backend. I was using VB6 as a front end for my job. And, about 6 months or a year later, I started getting into SQL Server back when it was called SQL Server 7. And those are fun times. I really, really liked VB6. And, to be honest, PowerApps has really renewed a lot of my the fun that I experienced with software development. So that's awesome. You have a programming background. So what it took me a few months when I was picking up PowerApps, because I had to think about things a little differently. It's more declarative based. If you think about an Excel spreadsheet, you've got these expressions at the top of your screen that you think of you would call more of an expression than actually code. So PowerApps is a low code environment, and I'm clicking around here in StreamYard here. It's a low code environment. So they try to minimize the amount of code that you have to write. And then, so it's more expression based. They got a lot of inspiration of how people are using Excel. And so people coming from Excel, they made it for the citizen developer. But somebody like me that has a background in software development, I've gotten really excited about PowerApps because it's a rapid application development platform. I can crank out apps very quickly, much quicker than what I did with ASP.NET, C#, SQL Server as a full stack development platform. So hopefully you really like it, Mr. I'm sorry, it's not Abacus. Yeah, so very good. So I am going to show my screen again here. So we are in Access and we're going to enable this content. So we are going to let's see, what is the deal here? I just clicked on enable content. I had to click on it again. Okay, very good. So here this comes up, and now it has, so Access actually has a front end layer. So you've got forms, you have a UI part, and if you want to sort of get around that, what I do is I just right click and say design view. And I don't know that I really want to see it. So it's got a login, and you can actually see how it's used as an app. That might be a good thing for us to take a look at just real quickly here. So you got all these users. So there's probably an employees table, right? In fact, I can't go over here if I'm running this form. I am going to go ahead and click on a Robert. I feel like a Robert right now. Let's click on login. And it's going to bring up this screen, okay? So what you'll see here is we've got these quick links. So perhaps this is like the menu bar off to the side. Okay, so view inventory, view orders, customers, purchase orders, suppliers, employees, shippers, and sales reports. So those are the main areas of this application. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this and say design view. And I'm going to go over here and I want to look at object types and I just want to look at the database tables. Okay. So you'll see all these here. Okay. And some of these are mapping tables. So if you have, in a relational database system, you've got these relationships. Between two tables, you've got a one-to-many relationship. And in some cases, you might have this many-to-many relationship where, let's say, customers can place many orders, and then you've got products that are purchased in an order, and then you've got so you, as you work out your relationship in your application, there's sometimes you're like, okay, well, there's a many-to-many relationship between these two entities, okay, and what you have to do is have a mapping table in the middle. So we'll go over that a little bit later, but I just sort of want to show you all these different tables. Now, what I did do is I have this one that I was working with, and I sort of wanted to space this out. If you're in Access and you want to see this, you go over to, I think it's database tools. I'm trying to think of where I brought that up. I don't work in Access all that much, but it's, gee whiz, where did I find this? Let's see here. Relationships. There it is. So database tools, relationships. Okay. And it looks like a big hot mess. So what I wanted to do is I move things around. Okay. So these are all the database tables and showing all the relationships between them. So for example, so you see this between each of these tables. So you've got an employee here. Well, an employee might have these privileges. Now, if I open up this database table to look at privileges, there's only one privilege. So if you want to have different access roles within an application or privileges, like, okay, so only certain employees can do a purchase approval. Okay. And you might have like, quite a few more of these privileges. You could just add them in that table. Okay. So this is actually an example of a many-to-many relationship. You've got employees. Okay. And they could be a part of a privilege or actually a part of many privileges. And then a privilege could be associated with one or more employees. So you have a many-to-many relationship there. So you really need a mapping table in the middle to actually do that to accomplish that many-to-many relationship. But there is no, and you see the relationship between these tables, you see one to many. You see a little like an 8 turned on its side, it's an infinity symbol. So you can have an employee that would have an infinite amount of privileges, perhaps. Okay, so that's why it's called one to many. Sometimes you'll see a notation of like 1 to n, n as a Nancy. So just the letter n, and that what that signifies is some unspecified number or a variable. So it means like pretty much any number. So you'll never see between two tables this infinity sign to infinity sign. Okay, because you actually have to have a little mapping table in the middle to accomplish that. Now, and what you'll experience is you'll have an ID from one table and an ID from another table. And you could have other columns there as well if there's some other pieces of information that need to be associated with that many-to-many relationship. But on a basic level, a many-to-many relationship will have that mapping table and just have the ID of those two tables. Okay. All right, very good. So I'm going to look over here at the comments, looking for any questions or comments. These live sessions are driven by you guys. So as much as you want to engage and talk to me here, I'm going to engage and talk to you guys as well. And I have a little bit of an outline of what I'm going to do here, but a lot of this can be driven by you guys. Okay, and I do realize that probably most viewers of this video come afterwards, after it's been released. But I definitely like to connect with you guys. So if you're here live, please don't be shy. All right, so I'm going to go through this. So I'm going to go over the major tables within this database. So we have employees, we have customers, we have shippers. And in fact, if I sort of make this a little bit longer here. All right, so Mr. Abacus says, I'm taking notes. I'll have more questions later. Okay, very good, very good. So I'm sort of curious if you said you were a computer programmer before. Did you do a lot of database applications? And I'm also sort of curious if you did what database systems you were. Did you work with MySQL, SQL Server, Access? There's all kinds of databases, and there's also database systems that aren't even relational, that aren't more traditional in nature, like relational, such as like NoSQL. Okay, so Mr. Ekeba says no. Okay, very good. So you probably have done some coding, maybe engineering type of coding, or coding that just didn't involve databases. What I have noticed, databases with software development, um, you almost find database concepts with any type of programming that you do. Let's just think of a game. Think of when I was a kid, I played Pac-Man, and think about old Pac-Man going around, and you've got a score, and you've got all this type of high scores, all that type of stuff. That's all data, So of course, with a database, it's stored data on a disk, of course. So I guess that makes it a little different. But all right, let's proceed here. So we've got employees, we have customers, we have shippers, and suppliers. So I'm gonna direct your guys' attention to these 4 data tables. Okay, so I'm gonna sort of expand these. I'm gonna ask you what you guys notice about these 4 tables, perhaps what their common denominators are, what's similar, what's different between these 4: employees, customers, shippers, and suppliers. So take a look at that. I'll give you a moment to think about it. What's the common denominator between these 4 database tables? Everything except the name. Look at all the fields in these database tables: ID, company, first name, last name. I could go all the way down. They're exactly the same all the way down. That's a little strange. Yeah. Mr. Rebecca says they all have the same attributes. Absolutely. I have a feeling that whoever did this maybe was a little lazy, which is wild if you consider it, because this Northwind database has just been around, since when I got into the field back in 1999. It's been around for a while, and a lot of people in the field still know about it, and obviously you can still download and use it. And we're using it here. We just need some sample data, and this would be a great thing. So by the way, the whole reason I'm doing all this stuff with Access and Northwind is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new PowerApps application. And it's more of a beginner level, but we're going to crank out the Northwind application. We're going to create some UI screens that allow users to add, edit, delete data, to use the application. We'll just be building an application. We'll just see how far we can go. Probably be a 2 to 3 hour live stream. And we need this data there and ready. So, this session is just about importing data from Access and talk about why we're doing it and all this type of stuff. And Mr. Backus says, beginner, that's me. Very cool. Very cool. So you want to stick around for tomorrow, and we'll be talking about, we'll jump into the PowerApps, and we'll be using this data source. So it's great that you're here now. And I appreciate the engagement. I love talking to you guys. So it sort of keeps this a little less boring. Mr. Backus says, I'll be there. Awesome. Fantastic. And so this is a good sort of stepping stone for tomorrow. Now, if anybody is there tomorrow and they haven't seen this whole thing, no worries. What I'll do is I'll reference that. I'm like, hey, if you guys want to know about how we got this data, I covered it yesterday. You can go back and watch it. But it's not going to be like a prerequisite. Okay. So that's what my thinking was here. All right. So these are all the database tables. So yeah, so these database tables are a little funny. Now, I'm going to talk about what I want to do to this database before we get it into SharePoint. And what I want to do is, so we're going to clean it up. So table names. Okay. So if you create database table names within a relational database system, generally you don't want to have spaces in the table names, because a lot of times you got to put little indicators before, let's say like a little single quote before and after, that type of thing, when you're referencing it in code, in PowerApps as well. And You don't need to do that. The users aren't going to necessarily see these table names. So you want to get those spaces. So if you're creating new database table names or new SharePoint lists that are going to be used as database tables, uh, man, don't put spaces in there. They're not meant to be used by users, and we don't want any spaces because it just causes us trouble down the road. Same thing for field names, for column names. You don't want to do that as well. You'd want to get those spaces out. So as we're importing these one at a time, we'll want to take out spaces out of column names. We want to clean things up a little bit. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Let's go over to our other Access database. Okay, and okay, so we don't want to look at the relationships anymore. I'm going to close that down, and we're here and we're looking at this form. This is like it's like a dashboard for the application. We really don't need to see that. Maybe we'll go back and reference it tomorrow when we build out an application. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Okay, something that I will show you is there is a tool that seems very easy and straightforward to use. If you go over here to, okay, SharePoint, there's a little arrow going up to SharePoint. You might think this is a great tool. Export tables to a SharePoint wizard. Okay, listen, I'm going to tell you what this does. You're going to give it a SharePoint list, a SharePoint site URL. And once you give it, you hit next, it's just going to go like, okay, I'm going to take all these tables and shove them all into separate SharePoint lists, which you think that's exactly what you want, right? Well, if there's any errors or anything, it just doesn't import any data. And I did this before this live stream because I sort of wanted this to be as smooth as possible. And what I noticed is some of the tables came in, some of them didn't. And then, okay, well, I need to work through that. Well, too bad. This is just a one-shot deal. Okay. So this is a big no-no. I wouldn't recommend this at all. So I am and perhaps we'll run into some snags that will sort of show you some of the problems that it might have. Okay. So I'm going to exit out of that. So we're not going to use that. I don't recommend it. So I'm going to go over here. Okay. So customers now and what I recommend doing, we can right click on a database table here. We can export it into a SharePoint list. Isn't that great? So we could do that. And I recommend doing it one at a time. Yeah. So Mr. Abacus, why no validation? I know, right? It seems like, a wizard typically takes you from step to step. And if there's any issue, it gathers more information, but it's a little lacking, so I don't know, that'd probably be a good question for somebody at Microsoft, why there isn't some more ways to sort of deal with those errors. Absolutely. I agree with you. Some things just don't make sense. So that's my take on it. So we're going to import these one at a time, and we will do that here in a moment. But before we do, we're going to right click on this and we're going to say design view. Okay. Now, whenever you create a new SharePoint list, it's going to create its own field called ID, and it's going to be an auto number like this. And an auto number is something, let's say you create a new record, there's a blank table, you create one new record, it's going to give it a value of 1. The next value is going to be 2. It's nothing that you supply, it's something the database system creates for you. In Microsoft SQL Server, it's actually called an identity instead of an auto number. And SharePoint has this already built in. So my first thought was to rename this ID. Let's say we're dealing with customers. We could call this customer ID. And what I noticed was it sort of messed that up too. So if I left it as ID, it seemed to deal with it much better than me messing with that. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and take out any spaces in any of the column names. And in fact, I don't want dashes in there. You don't want any weird characters. So email address, job title, there's a space in there. What you'll find is if you have a seasoned developer designing a database system, they won't put spaces in here. So anyway, it's sort of a bad practice, and I don't know why they allowed it to stay in there. I'm gonna leave out this /province. I don't want forward slashes or backslashes in my field names. Those are special characters. So I'm going to take that. I'm just going to leave it a state zip. I'm just going to leave it a zip. Why complicate it? It should be descriptive. If you look at a column name, you should know exactly what type of data goes in there. but it should still be a fairly, very brief or short. Okay, so we got country, web page. I'm going to say site URL. And this should not modify any of the data inside the database. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to right click and say save. Okay, now I'm going to open this up. Maybe data sheet view gives me the data. See, it didn't mess with any of the data. So we've got data. We didn't have to come up with our own. So there we go. Now I'm going to close this. All right, so let's go ahead and import this. I'm trying to think if there is any. I'm just going to double click and open that data back up. If there's anything else I want to modify about this, and I think we're good at this point. Look at all those zip codes. They're all 999s. All right, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to right click on customer, and I'm going to say export. I'm going to say a SharePoint list. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a new SharePoint site. Doesn't that sound exciting? All right, so if you have an Office 365 environment, okay, so what I did was I did a Google search for, get rid of my bookmarks bar there. I just did a Google search for Office 365 login, and this is the link for that. So I would create a bookmark for this. Okay. Now what you notice is once you're here, this is like you've got all your Office stuff. Okay. So what you could do is you could go over here for this. This is called a waffle. So you've got 9 little dots in the shape of a square. All right. And then you've got SharePoint. So I'm going to open that up in a new window there. And I've got a bunch of stuff here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new site in the upper left corner. Now, if you don't have your own Office 365 environment, there are some links that I can share in the description below. If you do a web search for free or trial or community or developer Office 365 environment, or say developer edition of PowerApps, there's a way to get a free environment. It's sort of like a trial that just gets renewed over and over again. So you could do that. What you could do, what I would recommend, if you're serious about PowerApps and Office 365, and you don't currently work for an organization where you have an employer's domain to log in under, because if you try to go into PowerApps and try to log in with like your Gmail, it's not going to allow you to do that. I'm going to do a web search here. I'm going to say Office 365, not login, but I'm going to say pricing. Okay. And I'm going to show you this just real quick. It's incredibly cheap for what you get. Okay. There's actually a lot of benefits. This Microsoft 365 Business Basics, $6 a month. Okay. You get access to SharePoint. Here's the really cool thing. OneDrive. I believe you get like 2 terabytes worth of space for $6 a month, and you get access to Word, Excel, PowerPoint in the cloud environment. Okay, so if you want access, let's say to Microsoft Access, and be able to install these apps on Windows or your desktop computer, you'll want to spring for this $250 a month. But this is how I started off. I created this, and it will, if you go through, say, buy this for $6, I mean, you can just do 1 month, $6, just try it out. And if you don't want to keep paying for the $6 a month, you could just, cancel it. And, but what you'll notice is like you can it's like you're creating your own organization, your own tenant. You got your own Office 365 environment. So if you don't have access to SharePoint, and perhaps you work for a company that's got SharePoint, but the IT department and the SharePoint administrator won't give you fresh new sites create your own little thing and do PowerApps in your own environment without restriction. And that's what I did. I mean, you get to learn all kinds of cool stuff like this. So I'm going to click create site, and I'm going to say team site, and I'm going to call this Northwind. Okay, and I'm going to keep this as private. I'm going to click on next. This is very easy stuff. SharePoint's fairly easy. If you open a SharePoint site, generally you can sort of click around and figure a lot of things out. It's nothing terribly hard to get through here. I'm going to make myself an owner of the site. And then if you're going to put data into a SharePoint site and you need your PowerApps users to be able to access it, what I recommend you do is you make them members, so they can they have the permissions to add, edit, delete data, which your application is it needs them to be able to do. Make them members, but make yourself an owner. I'm going to click finish, and it should take me to that site. Okay, so here's a fresh new SharePoint site. That was very easy. So I'm going to click on site contents. It shows you all the cool stuff. Now it's going to try to give me a tour, which I don't need, I don't want. Again, I'm going to try to click on site contents. And here are all my database tables, or the contents of this list. It's a fresh new one, so I really don't have anything. I have a document library and a few other things, but you could go in here and create a new SharePoint list. And they've got some things that they like, little templates. They're trying to help you along, so those might be some good ideas for some PowerApps applications. The UI that SharePoint gives you isn't nearly as rich and as nice as PowerApps, so I wouldn't even you can create these, but what you want to do is use PowerApps as the UI, the front end, and you can go in and hit blank list if you want to start creating those. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a good list to the root of this SharePoint site. And what I did was I opened this link as I hovered over this into a new tab, and I'm going to copy that. Okay. And I'm going to take that link over here and access. Okay. So export data into a SharePoint list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name of a SharePoint site. Here we go. All right. So this is customers. Okay. And I could change the name here if I wanted to. And I don't want to open the list when I'm finished because I already have it open on another screen. I don't need any more browser windows open. I'm going to click OK. Very good. Now I'm going, okay. It says it was successful. You see that? Click close. I want to bring this window back down. Okay. Now it doesn't show us the new table because we need to refresh the page. Look at that. So we have 29 records there. And I'm going to click on customers and we can see the data, see that it all looks good. And I typically like this ID here, and I like it sorted by ID just so I can see all the IDs are okay. I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way down. Now, identities or auto numbers. So this is an auto number. If I were to delete this record number 3, delete it, and then I were to add a new one, it wouldn't take on that old ID of 3. It would be an ID of 30. Okay. So some cases in a database where there's an auto number, if you see some missing numbers in there, it's because a record was deleted and a new, any new ones did not take on that ID, which is a good thing because you'd have some weird referential integrity issues that you don't want to deal with down the road. Okay. For example, let's say we have a customer here and his name is Antonio. Antonio placed an order for an item in our products database table, created an order, and he bought this thing 10 years ago, and we have a record of it. Okay. Now we have a data retention policy of keeping the data around for, let's say, 10 years. And then anytime after that is we'll go through here and we will delete any customers who have not placed any orders in the last 10 years. So we might go through here and delete Antonio. And if we added a new customer later that day and it was Maria, and Maria got an ID of 2, and you were to bring up Maria, she might have it might look, because those IDs, there was stuff over here in orders that was referencing ID of 2, a customer ID of 2. And instead of it referencing an Antonio who actually placed the order, is actually on Maria. See, you see how it just messes everything up. All right. So we've got the data in there. Things are looking good. I'm going to go back to site contents. And what we need to do is we need to step through the rest of these, okay? So there's employee privileges. So I'm going to open this up here. And I'm trying to decide if I want to import I'm looking over here at the comments, and Mr. Abacus says the templates could be a good starting place. Well, you might think so. Um, when you're first learning, that's not a bad start. What I've noticed is that they're good for learning, they're good to get ideas from, but if you're going to create an application that you're going to use for the long term, I'd recommend starting from scratch. Or if you've done a few applications, and a lot of times what I recommend to people is you create an application template, a starting point for any new applications that you build. You start with your template, a good starting point that's got, let's say, a menu and an application bar at the top and all kinds of good styling and theming already built in. You start from there, because what you'll find is as you work with those application templates is that so there's different types of templates. PowerApps has templates, and so that's what I'm talking about right now. A lot of times you'll find that they do stuff in a weird way, and you eventually, oh, I don't want to do it that way. There's a better way. There's more of a recommended practice way of doing it. So you have to redo things or rip out things and put other things in. So if we're talking about access databases, access database templates, as we're dealing with here, says it could be a good starting place. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. In that case, yes and no. I would probably say the same thing, which is they're great for learning. It's great for getting ideas from. But as you see here, employee privileges, I'm going to close this. What you want to do is rename this because you don't want spaces in your names. Employee privileges. Okay. So there's a lot of things you want to say. And Mr. Mackey says, good to know. Yeah, very, very cool. Thanks for bringing that up because whenever somebody brings something up like that, I know more than likely other people are thinking the same thing. And I just sort of want to give my take on some of those things. So you guys don't waste time as you're learning stuff. Is these templates are great for ideas, sort of good for learning, but eventually you want to get to the point where you're building everything from scratch, or at least from your own starting point or from a template, which I've talked about in other videos and stuff. Okay, so here we've got employees. You know what? I think I'm just going to go through here and import each one, and then we'll deal with tomorrow on what tables we want to use, which ones we don't. So, okay, so we've got an employee ID. I'm going to take that out. And privilege ID, I'm going to take that out. I don't know what it's going to do. If it's going to, up in SharePoint, it's going to create its own ID. I don't know if it's going to do that or not. So I am going to save this. And let's see how it deals with that. I'm going to right click. I'm going to export SharePoint list. All right. And we are going to use Northwind data. Right. Employee privileges. And I'm going to click OK. Access cannot perform the export operation. Verify the export table and related tables have number primary keys. Okay, so what the problem is here is what it's complaining about is we have inside this, we have a reference to employees, which is going to be the next table. Okay, so we can't just do these in alphabetical order. So that table needs to be there, and then we've got privileges down here, so that needs to be there. Okay, so let's go do those two tables first. It's good that we renamed the table and took those spaces out of the column name. So that's done. Let's go down to employees. We'll do a design, and we'll take spaces out of these field names here. In fact, a lot of times I would just say email. Why make it longer than, I mean, if you see a field name called email, don't you already know what's going on, right? Gregory says access with 365. Gregory, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for the engagement. I'm not sure. Is that a question? Is that a comment? So let me know if you do. If you have a question or comment, I'd love to speak to that. But I'm not sure what you mean by that, or if that's a question or what you're trying to say there. Okay, Gregory, is a job. So perhaps what you're asking is using Access with Office 365. Can you get a job doing that? Well, this actually goes into the reason why I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know why I'm not using Access as a database here. Okay. That's because there is no connector within Power Apps to connect to it. You cannot access through a Power Apps application. Now, there are exceptions to that, and those exceptions is if you, and I'm gonna leave this previous comment up. You can import the data, which is what we're doing today. And so we are sort of using Access as a backend. I mean, not really directly. We're going to use that Access data as a backend, but we got to get it over to SharePoint to use it first. Okay. In fact, Microsoft has a new feature they just released that talks about integration with Access from Power Apps. And if you dig into that feature, what they're talking about is importing all that Access data into Dataverse and connecting to it from Power Apps. And you've always been able to do that, just like we're doing here. Instead of importing this into SharePoint, we could import it into Dataverse or SQL Server, as we're doing here, SharePoint. The new feature that they've released, and it's been a public preview or an experimental feature since Ignite of late last year, and they just released it to the general public to actually being used in production. The feature is when you're importing that you connect to a Dataverse, you get all the data over to Dataverse, you can still use your Access database as a front end to that Dataverse backend. But also you can, as you've always been able to, create a Power App application that uses Dataverse data. Okay. So in that case, what this new feature gives you is that you have your Access data in Dataverse, and you're connecting to it through either Power Apps or Access, and also both, if that's what you want. If you want to access it from both ways, you can still do that. So it's sort of a cool feature if you have a lot of database applications in Access and you want to write Power Apps, you can do that. You can import, use that feature. What I would suggest, what I would bring up is that once you start creating those user interfaces in Power Apps, you probably won't want to use the Access stuff any longer because you're moving more towards a cloud-based application, right? So yeah, so very good. So Gregory, very much thanks. My boss are not very in. Okay, so they're not very much into the Power Apps, or they're not happy that you can't connect to Access from Power Apps. Okay, yeah. So yeah, previously I was at a large organization, government organization, state agency, the state of Florida, and they encouraged me to use to use Power Apps, and I used it. We used SharePoint as a backend, but it really didn't feel very certain that they wanted to continue to use Power Apps. Just for myself, I'm really excited about the Power Platform, and I want to work in it, and I want to know that I've got a future there doing that type of work at the organization. So that's at the point where I decided to look elsewhere. And the Power Platform I believe, is just getting started in becoming popular. So you're going to see the demand for Power Apps developers, Power Platform people with skills on that platform. I think it's going to skyrocket. And it started to take off like a rocket in the year 2020 when we had the pandemic lockdowns and a lot of people working from home, and they were looking for solutions for problems, more cloud-based stuff rather than desktop-based or network-based stuff where people don't have to use VPNs. So the cloud base is where it's at and where it's going. So very cool. Thanks for the comments there. All right, so I'm going to continue to go through here and take out the state and the zip. And so Mr. Abacus says, what makes Power Apps the next big thing? Okay, so there is a movement going on. It's called the low code, no code movement. And so people, even developers like myself, they don't really try to market it at people like me who are in fact, full stack developers. But as a developer, what I see the value is that I could take all that experience of building applications, building databases, and I could take a tool like Power Apps and I can just like whip out all kinds of applications and really fill the needs for organizations, my boss or for clients, what have you. Okay. Um, what makes PowerApps the next big thing? It's a rapid application development tool. It allows you to write apps very quickly. The learning curve isn't nearly as big if you're looking at a full stack software development job job description, where let's say before Power Apps, I needed to know ASP.NET, Microsoft ASP.NET, Microsoft.NET platform, C Sharp. All these things are sort of intertwined, of course. But of course, you need to know SQL Server, and maybe JavaScript frameworks, maybe some HTML, some CSS. And when I say JavaScript framework, I mean these JavaScript frameworks these days, I don't really care for a lot of front end development. I can do what I need to get by inside of HTML, CSS, but when it comes down to JavaScript, I really don't want to be a JavaScript developer. Never have, probably never will. And some cases you need to use a JavaScript framework like Angular, or trying to think of some other ones. I think Vue.js, and there's one that I don't know that I'll be able to think off the top of my head that the Facebook came up, but there's like 3 or 5 that are like really popular. Back in the day when JavaScript really started taking off, you had Ajax calls, and you had jQuery that was really popular, and these JavaScript frameworks just come and go all the time. I mean, even the ASP.NET, the .NET framework and the C Sharp, they keep adding more features to it, but with these JavaScript frameworks, there's like a new one that comes out like every few months, and you never know if it's going to be the next big thing or it's going to be abandoned by the industry. And it's like, that's fine if you just love to learn new stuff. But and I'm okay learning new stuff, but I want to be busy about creating value for my clients, my employers, so on and so forth, rather than just learning for the sake of learning. But so anyway, yeah, if you do a little more searching and just do a search for Microsoft Power Platform, you'll find all kinds of benefits about the Power Platform and what makes it so great. All right, going on to Gregory. Very thanks. Well, you're welcome very much. All right, so I'm going to continue. All right, so we got country web page. Now I'm going to say site URL, which is what I used before, and then I'm going to hit save. Okay. And then I'm going to close that down. And for employee privileges, we need to go find privileges, and we need to open this guy up. We have privilege ID and we have privilege name. All right. So let's take that out there, and we'll say, you know, this is a strange database design call here, because we're already inside a privilege table or privileges table. I name my primary keys ID, and they're usually auto numbers or identities. I just call them IDs, and some people don't like that idea. I think it keeps everything consistent. You always know an ID, and then SharePoint goes that way too. They just have an ID, and they create it that way. I'm inclined to take that out because of how SharePoint deals with it. And hopefully we'll know. And also the name, privilege name. Well, we're already dealing inside the privileges table. Why do we need the word privilege in there? I don't know. I think I'm going to take that out. Okay, so the word name is an access reserved keyword. Okay, so I'm going to hit cancel or escape. I'm going to leave that there. I don't want any trouble. I'm not looking for trouble access. I'm going to save. All right, I'm going to close. Now we can go back over here. Well, we actually need to import employees, right? Okay, we're going to scroll down and find Northwind data. Okay, employees. We hit OK. Looks like it's working, guys. I'm going to hit close. I'm going to bring down my windows here and make sure we've got some good data. I'm going to hit refresh there. I'm going to look over in the comments here. And Mr. Rebecca says, very interesting. I agree with long-term value creation. Absolutely. And Gregory says, I will try to say it to my boss in my speak. Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for engaging, guys. It makes me feel like I'm less alone. I'm just talking to a camera here in my room. for hours at a time. All right, so we do now have employees. So I'm going to click on employees, and we've got 9 records. Now that's not a lot of employees, but looks like the data came over well. Okay, that's good. It's looking good. All right, go back to site content. So some of this might seem tedious as we're going through this. And you know what? If you guys don't have a job doing this type of stuff yet and you want a job, if you find this stuff just like, you can't stand it, like this is boring, this is the type of stuff that you'll do in a software development job. You know, I'm not an Access developer, but here I am working in Access. Well, um, a client, a customer, an employee, a fellow coworker says, "I need an app, and here's a spreadsheet. It's got all the data in it." You know what? You might find yourself in Access trying to do exactly this type of stuff. So, all right, very good, very good. So we've got employees. So now we need to go down to privileges, and let's import that. I'm sorry, export. Export from Access, import into SharePoint. All right, so we're going to go down, Northwind data, and okay, now it's doing something a little different here. Specify how and where you want to store the data. Did I click on the right thing? I'm sort of wondering here. I want to export into a SharePoint list. Okay, I must have clicked on something wrong there. So I'm glad I got out and redid it. Okay, privileges. Okay. And as that's running, I'm gonna click close and I'm gonna pull this down. Okay, I'm gonna hit refresh. And here's privileges. And pretty much the main thing that you want to see here is there's something other than a 0 here. And you might just see 1. It's like, what? Where's all the rest of the data? Well, yeah, this database only has 1 record in some cases. Okay, so we have that. So now we can import employee privileges, and we're going to export into a SharePoint list. And hopefully this comes in because this is our mapping table. So hopefully this does this well. Okay. Access cannot perform the export operation. Verify that the export table and related tables have numeric primary keys, and they do. Okay, so let's go in and look at this just momentarily. Employee ID and privilege ID. Okay, I'm going to show you guys what we're dealing with here. So we have an ID here. Okay, perhaps what it's looking for is that a column called employee ID. And a privilege ID. So let's go down to privileges. Okay. So that's what we're dealing with. I think I might be inclined to sort of open, well, there's only 1 record, guys. Okay, so this is how let's do this live. We'll do it live. All right, so I'm going to click on site contents. Okay, this is some on the fly troubleshooting. I'll show you how I do this. If I was having this problem with a job, whenever I create a new list, I don't show it in the navigation because I don't like to clutter up the sidebar. So I'm going to call this employee privileges. Okay, employee privileges. Okay, click create. It's going to have an ID. It's going to have a title. Okay. Now, what I want to do in here, so SharePoint, when you create a new list, it's always going to create a title. If you create a new one, it's going to, I'm looking at the comments here from you guys. Gregory, yes, I really want to share to all. Yeah, very cool. So I guess you're talking about PowerApps in general. You want to share PowerApps with people. If not, let me know what you mean there. I'll try to. Okay, yeah, very good. Mr. Agabus, live troubleshooting is where we learn. Absolutely. I'll get this little funny saying. I had this friend that I worked with. I worked at this place. It was a Microsoft partner. They called themselves or perhaps that was an official Microsoft title, Microsoft Technical Education Center. And I was a Microsoft certified trainer there, and I taught Visual Basic development. When .NET came out, I taught .NET classes, and I shared an office with this guy named Mark, and he was a really interesting guy. I was just a young pup. I'm sure I was in my 20s. It's probably like 25 years old, and he was probably a good decade or two older and wiser than I was. And he had this saying, and he helped me with a lot of the frustrations that I had, maybe even on the job, but maybe my personal life. I really don't recall, but he would say this. He says, "Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want." Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. So guys, I just want all this stuff just to import really quickly, smoothly. But you know what? You encounter snags, and experience is what we're getting here. And experience is what you need for a job. If you guys are looking for a job, working on the Power Platform, Power Apps, you want as much experience as possible. I'll give you guys a little tidbit of information. A lot of times people are looking for um, interview questions and answers. Let's say you're looking for a Power Apps job, and like, oh yeah, give me a list of Power Apps questions and answers. So when I go to a Power Apps interview, when they ask me a question to test my knowledge, I'll know the answers to those specific questions. And for programming jobs, I've had that. Um, but to be honest, I haven't had that in a long time. A lot of times, what happens, when I go into an interview, I pretty much tell people when I either applied to a job or somebody approaches me, hey, you got this job or something. I'll just send them samples of my work, and that just like puts to rest any concern that you know what you're talking about. It's like, whoa, this guy built this application here. Okay, so this application we're going to be building tomorrow, this Northwind Traders application, you can build it and you can make it your own. You could put your own little style and spin on it, and you're looking for a Power Apps job, and you go into an interview or before the interview, you email them like, hey, these are screenshots of the application that I built using it. And a lot of people do, especially if they're a little older, they've been around for a while. Like myself, they will know exactly what Northwind. So they're already familiar with the data. Like, oh wow, so you created a Northwind Traders? Yeah. It keeps track of customers and orders and suppliers and uh, purchase orders and all the inventory and all this stuff. Like, wow, this guy built this application around. And so the whole idea of like, oh, I got to ask this potential employee all these questions, make sure they know what they're talking about. That all just falls to the wayside if you can provide samples of your work. And it's like, wow. At the most, they might ask you, well, how did you do that? What was your thinking process as you were designing this? Well, gee whiz, if you're watching these live streams, you know exactly why we did certain things, right? So I'm going to go on, got some more comments. It doesn't take long to figure out who knows the subject and who doesn't. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Gregory says, sorry, it's something I dream. I don't really share. Okay. All right, very good. Well, thanks for the engagement. And we will move on here. Okay. I'm trying to get my train of thought. Sometimes I get a little sidetracked here. Hopefully it makes it a little more interesting. So what I told you guys is I'm going to create, and I did. Oh, title. When you create a new SharePoint list, it always creates a title. Okay, let me go into the list settings. So if you're dealing with any SharePoint list, okay, this is the one we just created. If you're looking at the list, you click on it, you go into it, and you're looking at it, there's always a little sprocket up here in the upper right corner. When you're dealing with SharePoint, you can always go up here and go to the list settings. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on list settings. And so we've got all the columns here. The title, modified, okay. Something that I don't see here is the ID. That's a little strange. But anyway, what I want to show you is this title. If you click on title, you can go in here. We really don't need a title for a mapping table. is I don't want to make that required. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go back to look at the data. And a lot of times when I create a new list, what I'll do is I'll go down here to show hide columns, and there is an ID there. Look at that. There's the ID. I'm going to move that all the way up. I'm going to hit apply. And by the way, if you didn't notice, each SharePoint list got all kinds of columns here. And we didn't create any of these. Well, these are just sort of built in there, and you can actually read from and work with if you want to. You might want to understand them. Like, for example, you got created, and created by. Created is a date time field of when that record was created. Created by is the person, is a link to that person that created it. Same thing for modified, modified by. Okay. So those can be useful. All right, so there's no need within SharePoint to create those because they're already built in. It's sort of nice. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to restore this down, and we need to create a new number column, and we're going to call this employee ID. Okay. It's a number, and it's going to be an integer. So it's really basic, very good. Now SharePoint does this thing where it puts this little card like, oh, employee ID was created. Well, thanks. But now your little notification's in the way. So after a few seconds, it goes away. But it can be annoying if you're trying to work quickly and get things done. I'm going to create another number. I'm going to restore this down, and I'm going to look at privilege ID. I'm going to spell this P-R-I-V-L-E-L-G-I-D. Save. And I'm going to edit this in the grid. And what I'm going to do is Andrew Cellini. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. I'm going to double click here. Andrew has an ID of 2. Okay. So I'm going to put 2. Okay. And that privilege ID, purchase approvals, privileges, okay, has an ID of 2 as well. Okay. So for our SharePoint list, we'll have 2. Okay. So now we've got this mapping table that's got the data there. Oh my goodness. Okay. There is a bit of voice echoing. Okay. That I do want to address. I'm really sorry, guys. I mean, we're an hour and 10 minutes in. So I do apologize if you guys have been experiencing that. How bad is it? Is it fairly loud or just a little bit? Need to make sure I don't have any other windows open that are playing anything. So because we had that error, we need to match IDs to transfer the mapping data. Yes. Yeah. The voice echo has not been there the whole time. Okay. So is the echo still there? I definitely want to address that. That's something I dealt with my very first live stream, and I felt like it ruined the first 15 minutes. It was really annoying. So it's not been there the whole time. So that's really good news. It's better now. Okay. So, okay. Well, let me know if it starts again, and maybe I can start to troubleshoot and figure that out. That's really weird. Okay. Very good. All right. So we have that. Okay. Now we just need to power through this and get all the rest of this data up here. Okay. I'm gonna close that. All right. So we have customers. We have this. We got employees. And let's go down and let's just take out all of these spaces if we can. And to be honest, perhaps I don't need to show you how to do every single one, because if we do a good 5 or 6 or 10, you guys probably understand the things that we need to do. Okay, so what's nice about you guys being here with me is that if you guys want to be prepared and have good data to work from while building, perhaps you want to build the app that I'm going to be doing tomorrow in PowerApps. If you go through this, you will you'll have the data yourself to work on as well. Okay. So I'm going to hit rename. And I believe F2 is the universal key for renaming, and it is. I just did F2 and it worked there. Order details, um, order detail status. Let's take that out as well. Accidentally hit F1 there. And the reason why I want to, like, I could rename them once they're up in SharePoint. SharePoint gets a little weird when you rename objects. So if you reference an object that was created in SharePoint and then later was renamed, sometimes you have to reference that SharePoint object or the column, the SharePoint list or the column name by the old name. It's really sort of annoying. So I want to try to clean that up as much as I can. Okay, very good. All right, so we have. I don't think we have inventory transactions. So I can tell you right now, we will probably need inventory and transactions in there before we do that. And I am not seeing. I do have another Access database over here. So let me bring this up here and just look at it here. So I'm looking for an inventory table. Okay, so we've got these where I showed you these 4 tables here at the very top are exactly the same. Okay. Okay, we have a table here that needs to be pulled down. So you see how these tables relate to each other here. Okay, so inventory. Where's my inventory? Inventory, transaction types, inventory transactions. Perhaps there is no table called inventory. It might be just called products. Okay, that's probably what's going on there. Okay, I just wanted to show you guys that. All right. Well, if inventory is based on products, we should probably go down here to products and work with it. Okay. So supplier IDs. Okay. Well, first of all, you always want your primary key to be at the very top. So we are going to reorder some of these fields just in case. It's supplier IDs. I don't know what the IDs will be a single number that will relate to a supplier. And it looks like, okay, so Gregory says, I don't speak the same language. I think you some things in my day are the same. So by the way, I admire you guys that speak other languages because I only speak English and I am married to a Puerto Rican who speaks English and Spanish, both very well, by the way. I've taken Spanish in high school and I really can't speak very much Spanish. It's a little of a disappointment. And so bravo to you for not being able to speak English very well, but you're here speaking my language. So I appreciate that. Okay, so kudos to you. For all I know, you speak 5 languages, and English is just one that you know. So I just wanted to mention that there's something to be said for even if you don't speak the English language, as fluently as somebody who does, like myself. But look at me. I mean, I don't know what language you natively speak, but I can probably tell you. I can tell you with fairly certainly, no matter what it is, I don't speak it. So kudos to you. Okay, so I definitely don't look down on somebody that can't speak the English language. So all right. So moving on here. So we got products, and so I'm going to be taking out these spaces. Okay. Simplify as much as this I can. Price. quantity price per unit. Take those spaces out. So guys, talk to me so I don't feel so alone here. I know some of this is going to be some tedious. So what's going to keep this going is if you have any questions, comments as we're going along here. Okay. So I've got products. I've cleaned things up here. And I'm gonna save, close it. All right, Gregory says Access. You're talking about Microsoft Access? All right, so we got products. And let's just put products in there. Let's get that in there. Let's see if that goes up there. Okay. Because it does have a foreign key in there. Okay, I appreciate this, Mr. Abacus. I know it's tedious, but I'm taking notes. Yeah. So me as a content creator, one of my biggest fears is people are dropping like flies as far as in retention. So as I create a video, I notice after it's been out there a few days, I can notice how many people stick around, and people sort of stick around. It's it's a little better for live streams like this, but when somebody sees this an hour, they'll stick around for maybe a minute or two, and then they quickly realize they don't want to stick around for a whole hour, 2 hours. I mean, we're at what, an hour and 20 minutes. So I appreciate you guys that stick around and just work with this. And Access is my day. Okay, so you worked in Access perhaps in the past. Okay, very good. So you could probably teach me a few things about Access. I learned Spanish when I worked in a factory. Okay, cool. You'd think I would learn Spanish being married to a Puerto Rican. Little by little, I guess. But okay. So anyway, I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna hit Northwind Data, and I'm gonna import this one. And hopefully, we don't have any errors. This is looking good. Yay! I'm excited. I'm sort of hoping we don't have any of the errors like we did for that other mapping table, because I'm sure some of these mapping tables have more records than just one row. And there's nothing that we need to do. So you notice over here in Access, it's got all these relationships. You don't have that in SharePoint. The relationships are established here in your head. And if you look at the SharePoint list, you'll notice things that say you have something over here. Yeah. This table here has got an employee ID. Well, if you see an employee ID, well, there's probably a table over here called employees and it's got an ID. So that's how you sort of deal with relationships in SharePoint. There's no real way to create these relationships. So, all right. So, well, I had a Mexican girlfriend at the time, and she was from Caiapas. Is that how you pronounce that? Need to work on my geography, my pronunciation as well. All right. So, okay. So relationships. We don't have relationships in SharePoint. It's sort of inferred. Okay, so we did import that. Okay, so we have products. I need to do a refresh to see it. And we have 45 products. All right, so that looks like it's doing well. All right. All right, Chiapas. It's all good. Chiapas. Chiapas. All right, cool. Well, thanks for letting me know. I can say Guadalajara. It's one thing I learned in Spanish class. Guadalajara. All right. So here's all this. This is looking good, guys. All right. So I'm going to hit site contents. By the way, if you're watching this live stream and things are moving a little slow, and as long as you don't think I'm talking too quickly, what you can do on a YouTube video is there's a little sprocket at the bottom, and you can change the speed to 2x. That might be a little too fast. It's the fastest speed, 1.5 or 1.25. It sort of speeds things up. Also, you can't do this while you're live. Of course, speed it up, right? Because we're live. But you can do that if it's a replay of the live, and you hit the right arrow or the left arrow to either rewind or fast forward by 5 seconds. Just sort of like to share that with you guys. All right, so we have that. We have products. Okay. Now, what we don't have, I'm going to try inventory transactions. We might need the types first. Let me go in here. Okay, so we have these types. Let's add these. So this is like a little, could be like a little drop down or a enumerated value. So I think that what we have here for inventory transactions is that we will have inventory transaction type. Yeah, it's this first column here. I think that we'll need this one in here first into SharePoint. And we want to take out that name though, that space right before name. I'm going to close that and save it. Of course, I'm going to import that. Oh, good. So that's in there. Inventory transactions. Now let's go in and make sure we got all our spaces out of there. Auto number. A transaction type. Well, a transaction ID. This is sort of weird how they did this because this is an auto number. So this is the primary key. So usually you will want the primary key to be exact naming of the table or just be ID. So I think I'd like to say just ID. And you look down in the T's of the table names, there's no transaction table. Um, the name of the table is inventory transaction. So if anything, it should be called inventory transactions ID, which is very long for a column name like that. Okay, transaction type, I'm going to keep that in there. You don't want to remove one of them. So you got a question mark. You don't want to remove one of them. Remove one of. I'm not sure what you mean. About this ID. I'm going to remove these spaces though. And also, whenever you see an ID and a column name, those are probably foreign keys. And you want to have all your keys and related type of stuff near the top of the screen. Okay. I'm going to move that up there. Okay. Move one of them like transaction type. Wouldn't the type be a sale? Well, let's go take a look at that real quick. Let's go look at, we have purchase, sold, on hold, and waste. So those are the types that they want to have in there. We could add or remove our own. So we'll probably work on that more tomorrow as we work on this. In fact, I probably won't even leave this in a database table or a SharePoint list. Typically, when I build an application, if it's a short list like this, it's not going to change. I don't want to have to go to the database for that. I might actually keep that in the application. This is a little collection or hard coded list or array. I don't mess around with separate tables like this, but I did want to go through the exercise of getting everything that we can imported over there. So at least we know everything's over there that we had in the Access database. But yeah, I would probably, and I'll cover this more tomorrow, is we'll probably want to simplify this. Now, if this is a list that needs to be dynamically added to and removed, database driven by the database, then yeah, we have to keep that in a database table or SharePoint list. Okay, so Mr. Backus says, I see. Very good. Gregory says, sorry, I am a very beautiful guy, but some persons don't want to be better. They think it's a joke. Okay. But some persons don't want to be better. Okay. All right, very good. Hello, have a nice evening. Good topic again. All right, cool. Well, thanks. Um, pity KE91. Awesome. Well, thanks for stopping by and hanging out with us. So let us know if you have any more questions or comments. So we're importing the Northwind Traders database into a SharePoint list. Gregory says, me, I use Access every day. Okay, use Access every day. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. So I'm working at an organization where we have a lot, like hundreds of Access databases. That was the main reason I was hired, and get those into PowerApps. We write those as PowerApps. So you learning PowerApps, this is a great thing to sort of pick up if you're using a lot of Access, hopefully you can move that data over into something like the Dataverse and write the front end in PowerApps. So we'll be so tomorrow's sort of like the second part of that. Okay, so tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time is when I'm doing that, and I'll have a separate little thing for that that I'll probably put out there so you guys can click on that. That will go in an hour or two, probably after I end this one. Okay, so I'm going to go through here, and I think we're good on the no, we're not good on the column names because I still see it here. In fact, that transaction create me. Oh, it's called creative. You know, like, well, it's already date time field. What do we have to put? You know, like, well, what do we have to do? I'm sure all of it. Sometimes, you know, if you're doing a perfectionist, you make things more harder on yourself than what it needs to be. And then I'm going to bring up any foreign keys to the top, any ID references there. Okay. I think we're good there. Now I'm going to hit Control Apps and close it. And I am going to, let's see here. Where is my, there it is. It's behind my Access window here. And in fact, I might just sort of size this down a little bit. Okay. That might be good. Just sort of leave these two things here. All right, guys, as I'm going through this, if there's anything I can do to make this more interesting, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Um, okay. My voice is cracking. Is it still doing it? Hopefully not. Sorry, I did a refresh on my end. The voice is echoing again. Okay. Now, I do have a question for you. Do you happen to have the live stream open in two separate windows? That might be something to think about. So if you're listening to a one window, like just mute it, like turn the volume all the way down and see if you still hear that echo. I'm hoping the echoing isn't on my side. So you said something about the trans create date. Yes, I did. What I said was it's already a date time. If I was to create that data type, I'm sorry, that column name, I probably wouldn't put the word date in there. It just feels redundant to me. So that's what I said. I really want to find more with Abel's with power. So you might want to perhaps what you're saying is you want to attain more skills with Power Apps. So if you stick around the channel, this is what we talk about on this channel, picking up Power App skills or the Power Platform. Okay, specifically Power Apps, but very good, very good. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to do a refresh, and we did inventory transaction types. Okay, so we have that. And what about inventory transactions? Do we have inventory transactions? Did we actually import that? I don't think that we did. So we need to do that one. Cross your fingers, guys. I feel like we've been fairly fortunate in doing this stuff. With live, there's sort of a saying: if you're presenting, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. So like the Murphy's law. This is looking good. Microsoft Access can't apply all the records in the append query. There's a type conversion failure, and it didn't add zero records to the database due to key violations. Well, that's unfortunate. It's due to validation rule violations. Okay, do you want to run the action query anyway? Yes, I do. Ugh. Yes, please. Just get it in there. We'll deal with it later if there's some problem. But as I told you guys, we don't really have like foreign key constraints like you would in a real relational database system. Mr. Abacus says this is why I don't like Windows. Well, are you an Apple person? My wife is an Apple person. She really likes Apple products, operating systems, but I think I mean I've tried Linux. I really sort of like Linux. That was sort of cool. But there were some basic things that I just couldn't do that I'm used to doing in Windows. But yeah, I would say this is more of a an access, like integration, with software. Working in the software industry, uh, in my career, I would say that's the hardest part of software development is getting software to work with each other, the integration part. But and what's cool about Apple stuff is it's all written. Well, I wouldn't say it's all written. I mean, you still have an app store, but you can install stuff from other vendors. Like you install Access on um, on iOS. But no, either way, I gotta survive. I do like Linux more or less. Okay, very cool, very cool. All right, so I think we got inventory transactions in there. I'm gonna hit F5. I am so glad that it allowed us to say yes. Just keep on trucking. Yes, 102 transactions. This is great. Now I didn't get these IDs. I'm gonna open up this data. Okay, look at this. There's no IDs in here. Why? So that's sort of strange, isn't it? I'm gonna scroll all the way down. Yeah, there's no data there. So we'll just roll with it. How about that? Then we have transaction type, and that is an ID to that other table. Okay, that's good. So it came in just fine. Okay, when I saw these blank values for the foreign keys, I'm like, oh no, but no, it's that way here too. Um, yeah, it's was lost in the transfer. No, thankfully, no. I thought initially it was, but no, it was that way inside the Access database. So we're good there. Okay. Very good. So let's move on. We have that. What about invoices? Is there anything else that I need to have? Let's open up as design view. I want to change this to ID. Oh, here we go. Another right there. ID invoice date. Okay. Due date. Okay. Scheme out the spaces. That's good. I'm going to control S to save. Close. We'll click on this to open it up and look at this data here. So we don't have anything for due date. Well, look at this tax, shipping, and due amount. It's all zeros. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to close this and we're going to right click and we're going to export and do a SharePoint list. All right. I'm going to get site contents there. And it's a going. Oh no. Thankfully, I can click yes again. So, if you guys are like me, you're able to sit and work behind a keyboard and monitor for hours at a time, concentrating on one thing during that time. I'd sort of like to mention something, which is what do you listen to music? You guys probably, if you do, you probably already know what type of music that you like. I have like a little coding jam that I like to listen to. I think I'm gonna paste that into the chat if you guys are interested. There's one particular um, song here I'll link you guys to that I like to sort of listen to. Let's see. Here is my list. Bring this up. It's called Chill Step. Okay. And I'm going to share this link. And that's a 2 hour playlist of songs I like to listen to while I'm coding. I don't always listen to it, but it's stuff like that. Yeah, basically everything like Chill Step. This stuff is great. Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing until I listened to this stuff. I was like, oh, I like this. But absolutely. Okay. I don't think I have my screen set up to actually share my system sound, so I couldn't just start playing this music. Um, unfortunately. So won't mess with that. But I thought I'd mention that there. Okay, so I think we're there. We're good there. Invoices. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna hit F5. Yeah. Okay. Now, what I don't like is that it's adding in these other tables again. Ooh, that's awful. That's awful. Uh, YouTube is great for combing music in new ways. Absolutely. Sometimes I use Pandora, and then I have a subscription to Spotify as well. It's nice. So what I'm thinking is, even if it created these other tables, it's no big deal. We just won't use them. I mean, if you look at these employees, they're going to have the exact same data, exact same IDs and everything, and we can just delete them. No biggie. Okay, it's a little annoying. Sort of makes you feel like it's a little bit of a sloppy process here, but it is, of course, an imperfect process. We live in an imperfect world, so sometimes you just got to roll with things. All right, so we have invoices. Let's look at well, before we can have order details, we probably want to make sure we have orders in here. Gregory says, we said me access is dead. Access or Excel no more. But it's today. You must be Power BI, but I can access. So I like your demonstration with SharePoint list. Yeah. So I don't have very much, if any, of Power BI experience. Most of my experience is Power Apps. I have some experience in Power Automate, but I really haven't got into the whole Power BI. I'd like to at some point. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've got ID. Let's put in here. Spaces here. And while I'm doing that, I'll share. Hey, if you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated. And I'm back. Ship city, ship state, and zip country. And we don't need slashes or regions in there. Type, date, and let's set it to now. Those form keys up here. Have anything with ID in it? Probably want it up there, but we gotta select it. Move that up there. Shipper ID. Move that up there. All right, I think we're good. All right, very good. Now I'm gonna hit Control S. Close that, and we're gonna try to import that. Okay. Data. Make sure we always click the right site there. All right. Here's a comment. May YouTube odds be in your favor. Thank you. Yeah. So that's like a little video clip I like to include in all my videos, especially for the playback. Of course, you guys are commenting, but a lot of views come from the playbacks. So I like to put that in there. All right. So I'm going to click on yes. Okay. So that was orders. And hit F5. Just make sure to have it. We have orders. Okay. We have orders one and orders two. Okay. Very good. Okay. We have a lot of tables that involve orders. We have order details, order detail status, order status. Well, let's see how many of them are here. We only have orders. Okay, that's fine. Let's deal with these statuses first. Yeah, these are like little drop down lists. This should be simple, easy, right? Okay, let's go in there. Do. Status name. Close and save. Let's export that. It's a great question. How do these duplicates happen? Okay, so when we're importing these things, it says, "Oh, we've got an error," that type of thing, and it asks me if I want to go ahead and continue. Um, I think that's where these duplicate tables are being created. So what I'll do is, when I'm all done, I'll go through and delete these duplicates. Um, they're not hurting anything, but we really don't need them either. So I'll end up removing them, but I think that's what's going on. It's Access is sort of freaking out because it's trying to maintain all that referential integrity, and so it feels the need to create these things. So that's where they're coming from. Yeah, it's an imperfect process. I mean, if you want to, the reason why we're doing all this, we're getting all this sample data, and if this is a real app for a real client, I would probably, it's not very interesting, but I would take the time, of course, with a real application, you don't need the sample data, is I'll probably create all these. I'll probably go to the Dataverse, and I'd probably create all these database tables and everything manually, one at a time, make sure everything's nice and good, and the relationships are set up properly, and we wouldn't have to go through this. But we are getting the benefit of using Northwind, and we got the sample data, which is nice as well. So do we have order detail status? Let me hit F5. We do. And we got 6 records. That's good. What about order details? Yeah, I don't think so. Because we got a lot of spaces in here. I know that. So if you guys are interested in building applications, we'll be doing them tomorrow. This is going to be here for beginners, but if you want more of an advanced or maybe even intermediate advanced, I have a whole playlist on my channel. So if you're viewing on my YouTube channel, you can go to my playlist, and I've got a whole work order system that I've built in my screen, and I go into a lot of depth of how to build everything. We use SharePoint lists from scratch, and we have a good time. And I would call it a professional grade app. It's something I did for a real client doing real freelancing. So it's a good example to look at. All right, so now I have that. I want to make sure we do have orders. Okay, do we have order status? We do not have order status. So access is not really dead. Um, as long as Microsoft continues to offer access, I don't think it will ever be dead. It's been around for 25 years, probably getting close to 30 years. And so a lot of things, as long as the company is still releasing it. Now, there's no Office 365 cloud-based version of Access. Okay, so they put the they sort of drew the line there. And if they offer that in the future, then it will continue to be alive. But if you're looking for cloud-based stuff, cloud-based applications are the way of the future. And for example, I mean, this is a channel all built around PowerApps. Perhaps a lot of people building stuff in Access are going to be moving towards PowerApps. low code. You call Access a low code environment. You could write code. You could write your VBA code in there or scripts. So you could call this a low code environment. Um, but I would say go with Power Apps, of course. Okay, I will check out those videos. Yeah, there's probably a good 10 or 12 videos, and I add to them all the time. By the way, this next Monday, I will be releasing a probably a 18-minute video talking about asking the right questions out of clients, customers as you're building a new app, of how to pretty much how to gather requirements and how to do it properly, how to ask the right questions, make sure you get all the requirements so you know what it is you're building. So when you start a new application, a lot of times you just want to jump into Power Apps and just start building it out. But what I recommend people, especially in that video, is take the time and take a step back, get the information right up front. And I already have a video already out there. There's a playlist called Zero to Hero, and it's pretty much my course. I'm building out a course right now, and so if you go through those videos, one of the last ones I did was how to define, like, get the full project scope, you know, ask why the application is being created and who are the users and all kinds of really good questions. And then you jump into actually diving into the requirements, gathering all that type of stuff. So that's what I'll be releasing on Monday. And what do you use that is no code app? Well, um, Power Apps is no code if you're talking about model driven. So if you create a new Power Apps application, you have a choice of one of three Canvas apps, which I think is probably the most popular, and it's what I teach here on the channel. There's model driven, which is based on the model that you create in Dataverse, and it can pretty much only connect to Dataverse. Okay. Um, and then you've got Portals, which is a public facing website, a portal website, and it uses Dataverse as well. Um, so you could say, in one sense, Power Apps is no code if you're talking about model driven. Now, Canvas Apps is low code. So there is code that you will have. You can write as much code as you want, you feel like you need. I have worked with no code platforms before, well, one specifically, which is a Dello, and it looks really nice, looks really simple and easy. I'm like, oh man, I could create all kinds of stuff even faster than Power Apps, but it lacks a lot of the control that you need. So I would steer people away from no code. Um, so even with model driven, you're really limited on what you can do visually and stuff. But it's good for certain situations. But that's the no code type. And there's also Bubble out there. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, of course. You like using Access, try Power BI. Many things are able. Okay. Yeah. Power BI is a great tool. Yeah. That's more for reports and KPI dashboards, that type of thing. Yeah. And then, so Mr. Abacus, you probably have heard of people using Zoho. I don't know very much about Zoho, and I believe Zoho has its own application development platform revolving around Zoho data. Um, Now, I'm not qualified to really say anything about Zoho. I don't know if it's low code or no code, um, but that'd be interesting to find out, though. So I know a lot of people do work with Zoho. Okay. All right. So we have this. What were we doing here? I think we took out the spaces there. Order status. Okay. I have heard of Zoho data. Okay. Very good. Do you want to save? Yes. Okay. Let's look at tax status. Everything dealing with orders. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure that we have all this cleaned up. You know, some people will just have an ID and some of it will need something else ID. Not very consistent. When you create applications and database and stuff, you want things to be really consistent and predictable. So it's sort of strange. So I'm gonna double click on this. Okay, so these are the, why does it have an ID of 0? That hmm, an auto number or an identity should start with 1 and go from there. But I'm gonna import that or export from here into SharePoint. Scroll down, hit Northwind data. Okay, orders tax status. And there's two records there. Let me look at the ID in here. Let's see if it has a 0. Uh, this cell is read only. Okay, yeah. Okay, 1 and 2. That's what I expected to see. 1 and 2. That looks good. All right. So now I'm going to okay, order details. Do we have order details? No. We have status. So let's well, I want this guy in here. Orders status. We don't have that one. Let's add that. Trying to keep everything straight in my head. Order status. We have 4 records. Okay, very good. Orders. Okay, we got that. I know we don't have order details. All right, I'm going to click yes. And then we will need to do another comparison. Make sure we got all these tables there. All right. I'm going to move this over a little bit here. Okay, went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 5 tables dealing with orders. So we ordered details. 1, order detail status. 2, orders. 3, order status. 4, order details status. That's one we need. Excuse me. Okay, looks good. All right, order details status. Okay, it's there. All right, what about orders? We got orders. We got data there. Order status. Let me move this over a little bit here. Orders status. Orders tax status is there. Orders, let's see, privileges. And so after transferring everything, what next? Well, that's pretty much the mission for today. And at that point, we will tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time, we will create a PowerApps application that will connect to this data, and we're just going to build the application. It's going to be for beginners. So if you guys are beginners, definitely want to be there. And we're just going to use this data. And pretty much what I'm going to tell anybody else that shows up tomorrow, I'm going to say in the video, is like, hey, we're going to build an application around uh, the Northwind Traders database. And if you've never set it up, take a look at the video we did yesterday. It will go into all that. So that's pretty much what we're doing today. Unless there's anything else that you guys want to talk about today, this is up for you guys. As long as there's conversation going and there's interest. A lot of times these live QAs, these live streams can be used as Q&As. So if you're building PowerApps and you have a question or you've got a video idea, bring it up here and get my feedback or my thoughts on anything that you guys want to talk about. And you guys are welcome as I'm working here. This is a little bit of a tedious stuff, but anything you guys want to talk about as I'm doing this, please bring it up. So for tomorrow, if you are an absolute beginner within Power Apps, what you want to do is create, go over to Power Apps. So if you've got this little waffle here for Office, open up Power Apps, bring that up, and open up that training template. So if you go, this is Power Apps, okay? What about under the tables, the macros, models, queries? Let me talk about that in a second. I can talk about that. Um, when you're in Power Apps, and if you don't have a Power Apps environment, let me know if you need links. But just do a Google search on, let's say, Power Apps, creating developer environment or community type of thing. You can create your own environment. I think I talked about it earlier. Um, a great way, what I would recommend, because that's what I did, is I paid at $6 a month and I have my own real Office 365 environment. And as you go through other steps, you'll get to this. If you go to powerapps.com, say login, you'll get here, make.powerapps.com, you'll get here. And once you're here, something you might want to do today, it's not a prerequisite for tomorrow, but you're going to be better off if you go down here and say Power Apps training. This is a little, and I have a whole hour and 40-minute video where I take everybody through this. It's a template that's got like 22 or 25 different lessons inside of it. It teaches you all the basics of Power Apps. So if you want to know the basics of Power Apps, that's the thing to go through. So check out my videos. There's one video that's and a lot of, I have a bunch of like 2 to 3 minute videos that are little sections of that larger video. And I also have a beginner playlist here within my channel. You go into that and say beginner Power Apps. You'll find them all there as well. Okay. All right. So what about the other stuff? Okay. This is all the stuff that we're going to recreate in Power Apps. Okay. So your queries, we're going to be talking about querying tomorrow, and we're going to create our forms, our screens. So we're going to create our own screens in Power Apps. Reports, we can build some fundamental or basic reports in Power Apps with a screen. We can have tabular data and repeating data, that type of stuff. Macros, we would replace that with code. It's called PowerFX. That's the language of Power Apps. And then modules, that's another place to put code, VBA code. So we got PowerFX for that. And if there's any processes that we need to kick off, we have Power Automate for that. So all that type of stuff is going to be replaced. All this stuff is getting replaced by the Power Platform. I mean, SharePoint is the Power Platform, but it could be in the Dataverse. So we're going to be replacing a lot of this. Yeah, it's absolutely. All right. So orders status, we have that. Orders tax status, got that. Privileges, we have that. Products, we have that. Purchase order details. Okay. Purchase or not, we don't have that one. So I feel like we're getting close here because we have a lot of this stuff already done. All right, we need to take out spaces here. Other questions or comments in that tab. By the way, if you're watching this video, it's not live, you're watching the playback, let people know I do on every single comment that's in my videos. Okay. And I plan on always doing that. So if you leave a comment, believe you me, it is heard. I'll take a look at that. And unless this channel just grows like so big, I just can't manage it, but I can't see it being that big, to be honest. Do you want to save changes? Yes. Okay. Okay. So Gregory says, yes, I have some problems with the number in the list. Okay. So what list are you talking about? I'm not sure what you're talking about there. I have some problems with the number in the list. So Gregory, let me give me some more information on that. Okay. So purchase order details, we need to import. Oh, maybe this has got a lot of, well, it's importing a lot of the other data in there as well because there's all these relationships. Okay. Yes, I want to append. Max 5,000. Okay. I don't think that is a limitation of a Power Apps list. I think you can have much more than a 5,000 records in a SharePoint list. So I don't know what limitation you're talking about. Are you talking about records in a database table? I don't know. 5,000. Now, Power Apps does have a limit of how many records it can work with at once. I mean, there's a little bit of a workaround, but um, it starts off as 500. Now you can increase that to 2,000. Rarely is that too much of a problem because there are things that you can do. I mean, is there any reason to show 2,000 records on a screen? Probably not. So typically people want to filter down and look at just a subset of records in order to select one, in order to edit, so I don't know if that has anything to do with that. Better to append to remove. Otherwise, you're stuck, right? Yeah, I think so. That's why I'm doing that. And when they say append, I think what that's doing is just creating these other additional tables, and I'm fine with that. To delete those is really trivial, very easy, simple. I just want it to continue. I don't want it to like, oh, I can't do it and it not import the data. So believe you me, I've done over the years done imports into different systems, and importing and exporting well, importing especially from one system to another, or a file into a system, is problematic because you would think, okay, well, this is text data. I've got a text data over here. I'm just going to import it. Or a number. Okay, this is a number. There's all kinds of problems that you run into. It is unbelievable the issues that you run into when you're importing data. Exporting is just like, yeah, I'm just going to take it and put it out to a file that you usually don't have any problems there. Importing, this is fairly mild compared to some stuff you'll run into, or at least I've run into. Um, Absolute showstoppers. So I'm glad it's just getting the data in there. All right. So I'm going to hit refresh there on the SharePoint list. Purchase order details. Order details right there. And we have purchase orders. Very good. Purchase order status. We have that. Sales reports. Do not have that. Okay. Well, let's open it up and look at it. Group by. Why is that a primary field? That's what the data looks like. On this thing here. Let's test with reports. I'm gonna save. I'm going to close. Okay. Okay. We may not use this. I'm going to go ahead and import it just so we have it. But it's got some dynamic like SQL queries, which, if you know SQL, you will not be using SQL inside of PowerApps. So just FYI. There are ways that you can. So if you're using SQL Server, what I do is I create a SQL Server view object on the SQL Server, and then I add that view as a data source, and then I can get at that view. So if you want to do joins and such, besides joins, there really isn't a big need to come up with a SQL statement. There are functions within PowerApps like filter, search, sort, all that type of stuff that you probably want to do. And there really isn't a way to filter down the columns coming back. So that's how PowerApps is. And I don't know, it just sort of simplifies a lot of things. So it's actually a good thing. All right. So unbelievable is the appropriate description. Makes you want to pull your hair out. Yes. Yeah. Dealing with importing issues and whatever. Absolutely. Pain in the butt. I'm taking SQL next semester. Okay. Very good. Very good. SQL, it's great to learn that if you want to get into the IT industry or data analytics, very good skill to have. Even if you're doing Power Apps, as I said, you can have SQL Server as a backend and do all your SQL statements into a view or a store procedure and do all kinds of really cool stuff on that end and offload that to SQL Server and not having that in Power Apps. It's a good thing. We have bad habits. Okay. Well, Gregory, do you care to expound on that? We have bad habits. Perhaps maybe the type of stuff that you have in Excel Access. Otherwise, I don't know what you're talking about there. So feel free to expound on that. All right. So sales reports. I think I said I am going to import that. Just to say that we've got everything that was in that Access database. Okay. I'm not sure that we're going to use it. Some of these things I'm not sure we're gonna use, but tomorrow should be very interesting. Should be very fun. Okay. And I have got a treat. One of my buddies, Kurt, is gonna be on the on the live stream. I'm probably gonna bring him on speakerphone. My buddy Kurt, he's sort of like a big brother to me. He was actually my mentor. He actually taught Visual Basic 6 at a actually no, it was actually they used VB4 when VB5 was out. And then he got me my first job working with him, and we used VB6. But that should be a treat. He's a really interesting guy, and he keeps things interesting. So I'm going to have him on speaker. Hopefully, as long as he's comfortable with that, should make the live stream much more interesting as we build out the application. And he doesn't know anything about PowerApps, but he's very interested. So it's for beginners, and it's gonna make things really interesting. All right, sales reports, and we have. I just want to make sure I got everything over there. Shippers, shippers is there now. We don't have any records. Okay, we should have 3 records. Why isn't it? Well, why don't we have records over there? I don't know. Um, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna open this up. I'm gonna edit in this grid. I mean, 3 records. Is it really? And they weren't really creative with the names of these companies, were they? I'm gonna say company A, B, B. Oh, it requires last name. Well, that's interesting because there's no last name over here. So, okay. That's strange. That's why it took the data. So as you can see, there's this traders has been around for 2 decades, and it's got some like really weird things that a seasoned developer probably would never do. Okay, and there's some address, but the address is whatever. I'm just gonna roll with what we have here. Are there any conventions you attend to stay ahead of the industry curve? Now that I've fully embraced the Power Platform, the whole pandemic, everybody did everything virtually. But yeah, I mean, there is a convention coming up actually here in Orlando. I might thinking about speaking there. Um, I need to finish up my application to be a speaker there, of course. But yeah, there's conventions about all this stuff. So if you're big into data, perhaps that's why you're watching this. Yeah, do a search for SQL or SQL Server conventions or whatever database system that you really like. If you're not a Windows type of person and you like open source, it might be MySQL or Postgres. Um, I've always heard that database system called Postgres. I don't even know if that's really the right way of pronouncing it. So um, it doesn't how it's spelled out doesn't sound like that pronunciation. That's why I've always wondered about that. But yeah, sure, yeah. If you like to learn in a live format and like to keep up to date, a lot of times the most recent up to date information is there. Otherwise, I like to learn how you guys, if I'm picking up something new, I'll go out to YouTube and see what's out there. That's what I do. All right, so we got shippers. Yes. Strings. Oh, wow, this is interesting. So they just got some information here of like maybe little error messages that might pop up in the application. Okay. So I'm going to go in here, design, make sure I'm just going to say ID. String. Okay. And we'll close that. Yep. Close. And let's go over here and make sure that we have the new strings table. I did see it. It said 62 down there. All right, very good. So suppliers. Do we have suppliers? That is it, guys. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all the unnecessary stuff, okay? And this should be easy, okay? Delete. Cannot be deleted because one or more lists are related to it. Okay. That's fine. I might look into how to get around that error, how to get this stuff out of here. I won't bore you guys with the details. So if you guys have any more questions, comments, please leave them down below. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And I will leave you with guys. For some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, got to hurry. Click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want. Thanks.